Welcome to Airwave. Airwave is a conversation hosted by me, Morgan Page, where music and technology converge to tell the stories behind the artists and the architects of creativity and technology. Radio is where I first discovered electronic music in the countryside of Vermont, and music and technology provided the path forward. Airwave is an exploration of how people make their art and how technology plays an essential role in the process. The show is largely conversational, but doesn't shy away from going deep and technical in the process. All right, welcome back to Airwave. This week we've got a very special guest, one of the world's most famous ghost producers. It's Maarten Vorwerk. He's here to share his tips. We go deep into the technical nitty-gritty. That's a big thing about Airwave. I want to go deep into the details. We're not afraid to do that. So we're going to talk all about his favorite plugins, his work process, his essential tips for building your career as a music producer and DJ. We're talking about how he built a studio in Aruba, how he started the book series Tip of the Week, his life as a ghost producer, and now using his real name once again. So excited to have him on the show. We get into a lot of valuable, useful information, and we go deep. So enjoy. This is Airwave with Morgan Page. Airwave is brought to you by RME Audio. Innovative, user-friendly, and high-quality digital audio solutions, RME offers a comprehensive range of audio interfaces, converters, and mic preamps, all based around its unique and innovative core technologies. Multi-platform connectivity across Windows and Mac OS and iOS class compliance has earned RME a global reputation for providing support to all users on all platforms. Visit rme-usa.com to learn more. So, Maarten, we're here talking remotely. You're in the Netherlands. You have the beach with you. You have the beach is upstairs. Is that right? Above
that's
the
true.
studio?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'm currently in my spaceship now, but upstairs I have a small beach. Yeah.
So, what was it like? You've built many studios over the years. Tell me a little bit about your time in Aruba and your time in the Netherlands and creating these creative spaces.
Well, I think during the years I have been in 7 different studios. I started out working for a record company, and they had a studio available for me as well. So that's actually where I started. But later on, when I left the record company, I wanted to build a nice space for myself with an office. So together with some old friends and colleagues, we drew up a couple of designs, and we just built it. Nothing fancy in the beginning, just like pretty okay room with some panels on the wall. So I mean, everything was pretty basic in the beginning, but it was a really cool space to work in.
So in Aruba, there's definitely some challenges. What did you run into building a studio there?
Oof. Well, what we actually did is before I went to Aruba, like the construction workers, they lived in Holland as well. So they visited my studio and they made like an exact copy of that studio. So they already pre-built a couple of things like the walls and the windows and stuff. So they put that all into the container and then they ship it to Aruba to make things a little bit easier. But little did they know that when they arrived in Aruba, they had to wait like, 2-3 weeks before the container was like cleared by customs. So they had some quality time on the beach before they could start building the studio. But there were a few difficulties there. It's like it's really hot in Aruba, so things like glue, for instance, that would not work, or like, how do you call it, adhesive on tape or whatever. It's just not going to work in higher temperatures. Of course, you need to build like proper air conditioning system to cool your studio. And also, because I came from the Netherlands, everything was 220 volts and 50 hertz.
Yeah.
And in the United States, they have 110 volt on 60 hertz. And Aruba has, 130 volts on 60 hertz. So it was quite a hassle to get everything converted. So I had to switch a lot of breakers in all my gear and to make it work. So yeah, that was quite a challenge.
Was there anything in designing these studios that you wouldn't do again?
Well, those studios were actually real workplaces. It was a copy of a studio I was already used to. So for me, it was easy in Aruba to get used to the sound because I was already working in a similar size space for the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. I was pretty happy with it, but still there was like always problems in the low end. But that's also because of the size of the room, so it was not easy to prevent that because there was not enough room to build like a bigger studio.
Is there any gear you've bought where you're like, you thought you'd really need it, and later on you decided, wow, this was totally an extra expense?
No, not really. I always have a very light setup. So yeah, I use like my computer, my sound card, my monitor controller. I have a MIDI keyboard in front of me and an Axis Virus TI and some analog gear. But, you know, a summing box and a mastering limiter. But, you know, that's about it. And I had like the similar kind of stuff in Aruba. So, yeah, that always worked for me really well.
And how do you integrate that with your workflow? Like, I see a lot of studios with a Virus TI there, and I have one here, and I think it sounds amazing, and I never end up using it, even though I know it's an incredible piece of gear. And I've dabbled a little in the summing stuff over the years. But tell me a little bit, just broad overview of integrating the summing into your setup. And I know you use the Better Maker limiter, some outboard limiting. How does that work?
Well, it's fairly easy. So I have 2 mono and 3 stereo. So basically, I set up buses in my DAW. So, for instance, I have a mono bus for the kick, a mono bus for the bass, and then I have like one for beats, one for synths, and one for the rest, vocals and stuff. And it's just routing, so I can directly route it out of my DAW into the summing box, and then it comes back in again. So I already listened to the summed some channels.
Some channels. And is that giving you a different sound? You can push things a little harder? What does that do for you?
For me, it opens up the mix a little bit more, and it adds like a 5% extra to your mix. Plus, the one that I'm using here has some other features where I can use like sort of parallel compressor and a harmonizer, just to glue and saturate everything more together as well. So I wouldn't say it's like super necessary to have it in your studio. It's just a little bit extra on top of your mix. But the Better Maker limiter, that definitely makes a bigger change for me. I feel that I can push things a lot harder. I can clip a lot harder as well. So yeah, that's really cool stuff to use.
And how does that work in the flow of things? You've got, I mean, you have things that are summing and you're clipping, but I know you said in the past you like to push things a little harder so you're not reliant on a final mastering chain as much as the buses beforehand. Are you clipping stuff earlier in the mix on the buses, or at what point are you doing that?
Well, that definitely depends on which genre I am producing. So if it's a harder genre, then yes, I will be clipping a lot more. So my go-to workflow would be that none of my channels would go over like 0. But I decrease the dynamic range a lot on every channel for the harder styles, that is, and then I can push it like to the max in the end.
And so you're trying to pull out a little more information, a little more emotion out of the information that's in there, like pushing the voltage a little bit more. Are there any specific techniques in your books that you talk about where, you talk about a lot of using distortion, things like that. Are there any favorite methods of yours for bringing out more emotion out of the sound?
When I make music, I want to have, especially when it's like in the harder genres, for the breaks, I want to bring in the emotion. So in that case, I would maybe automate the limiter so that we have more dynamic range in the breaks. But the moment the track drops, it needs to be hard and in your face. So in that way, I care less about like emotion. It just needs to hit very hard.
Yeah, and I guess it depends how you define emotion too, where sometimes distortion provides the emotion, but sometimes more dynamic range provides the emotion with an acoustic instrument. Because I think one of the biggest things I know people struggle with their mixes is getting things to translate and making sure that this harmonic information is equally powerful on different systems, and especially live. I mean, just the key of your song can totally change the impact of it. Like, as you know, mixing in C can often be tricky because the bass is either too high, too thin, or too low, where it's gonna just not translate live.
Yeah, so for pop music, I think that's not so much an issue, because it's more about the song itself. But if you're making a club track, I always try to be like between D sharp and G sharp, somewhere in between. So that means we have the lowest frequency would be, I don't know, 38 hertz, and the highest would be, I don't know, 50, 52, something like that. So you can make a really powerful low end, and the moment you are making a club track in C, so we need to mix like 32 hertz, which will never translate over a club system.
Right.
So that's gonna be a big issue.
It's tough, and you just have to, transpose up. Like, at least that's the only trick I use is maybe you're using the kick in G, but you still have issues that the center of the key is so low for the bass lines and things. It still creates a challenge.
Yeah, I prefer not to like sometimes, like the other day I was working on a like psytrance track which was in A sharp, which is already pretty high.
Wow.
So you can never have like, but you can have it, but it's more of a challenge. But like the really tight super low end which you expect in that type of genre. So I prefer working in a lower key then.
Sure. And when you're getting these songs together, how are you assembling your references, and how are you keeping perspective on the mix?
What do you mean by that?
Like, in terms of referencing other music or other tracks, are you checking other tracks in the same key, similar loudness range, or do you have ones you just know always translate?
No, I would like, because I produce in so many different genres, I need to know or switch my mindset a little bit towards that kind of mixing. So then I would take a reference track which would be in the same key, and I usually take a mastered version, of course, which I take from Beatport, and then pull it down -2, -3 dBs or something. So I have something to work with and something to reference with.
And are you looking at just the overall feel of the mix, or are you trying to hit a target like LUFS?
I'm trying to hit an overall feel of the mix. Usually when I reference certain genres, I try to analyze how that type of genre is mixed. Is it very centered, very mono? Is it very wide? What did it do with the beats? What did it do with like the pianos? Do they keep them really narrow? Do they keep them really wide? Also the vocal processing. I try to analyze as much as I can, and then I already know sort of how I am going to mix it.
And are you using any software to check the mixes, or are you just manually placing those reference tracks in your DAW?
I'm manually placing those tracks in my DAW, and then I route them to different bus, so they would not interfere with my master chain.
Right. And is it changing now? I mean, in terms of, there's always been the loudness war. I feel like it's persisted for club music because it has to be loud, and that's part of the feel. But even as streaming has allowed people to mix with a little more breathing room, are you seeing the same requests with artists and even with your own projects to mix as loud as possible?
I actually don't get those requests, but I always deliver multiple masters. So one for the club, one for like Spotify and radio, and sometimes one for social media stuff.
Yeah, I feel like if you upload to Instagram, it'll distort things a lot easier, or you really find out the reality of it, which is a big deal. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So depending again on the genre, I measure in RMS. So let's say I just released like a track with a hardstyle drop. Then I try to hit that at minus 2.5 dB RMS, something like that, but only on the drop part. But if it would be for Spotify, I probably would take that drop down to -6, -7 RMS, something in that area.
You know, it's funny when I've talked with I use Kevin at Wired Masters for stem mastering, and I always say, maybe we experiment this time and we do 2 mixes, and I'll do one for the club and one for radio and streaming, and he will usually push back and say that it's just a different feel. I mean, I guess it depends if you're trying to do one mix at -4 LUFS versus a -12, -14. But he says that you just got to do one mix. And I've talked to, and Zed and Calvin Harris were saying the same thing, that they were like obsessing on these details and getting into the weeds, and then they ended up in the end just doing one mix. But maybe you have a little more breathing room. You're not squeezing out that last 2 dB.
Exactly. Yeah. So in the end, that's what I do, but I just take down the end limiter a little bit so that it isn't hitting that hard anymore.
Yeah. Okay. And, one thing I'm always curious about is stereo width and the compromises that you have to deal with a wide mix versus a centered mix. And a lot of your tips in the books talk about trying to achieve a balance. So what's your philosophy on that? Because there's always going to be some compromise of things phasing out, things canceling. Are you just prioritizing certain elements?
Well, what I like to do in the beginning of my mix is always start like worst case scenario, meaning I pull out my smaller speakers, put everything in mono, and then I'm gonna put the volume down a lot, like very soft volume, and then I start building my beats, my bass, my melodies, and finding the right samples. So then from that point on, I already know that it translates well in mono. Then I start mixing all the elements a little bit more together. And then I put it back in the stereo mode again. So that way you already start from like with a good starting point in your mix.
Right.
But nowadays you have a lot of plugins which not really, phase your signal a lot when you put them more wider. The Imager from Isotope, for instance. I mean, that thing is great to make stuff more wider and create more room in your mix without creating much problems with your phase.
Yeah, I feel like there's sometimes you get the cheat codes for a wider sound that's mono compatible. Like there's, I was messing around with Phase Plant, and there's a comb filter in there. If you put the comb filter, usually makes things sound like shit, but I feel like in synthesis it's great. Obviously in making serum patches, but in Phase Plant, you turn it on, it sounds huge, it sounds wide, you collapse to mono, and it sounds perfect. And there's almost no trade-off. You might lose a little high end, depends where you set it, but have you found any other workarounds besides just building that foundation correctly?
No, I try to build the foundation correctly. Sometimes I also use an imager right from the start. So I put it on the end bus already, and and take it from there. And if I do get like a lot of problems with phasing, then I usually fix that with some mid-side EQ. And
you're taking out lows. You're taking out unnecessary information from the mix, or just rebalancing it.
Rebalancing it. So if I think there's too much side information going on, then I take it away or carve it away to create space for other stuff. So my center mix still stays really strong. Also on the master channel, I usually do a low cut on like the side channel, a little boost on the sides at 2, 3, 4K, and then roll it off again at like 10, 12K. That way, you still keep a wide mix, but you place the stereo information more in like the higher mids.
Yeah, and when you're thinking of how this is translating to the live environment, there's a lot of opinions that I hear from mixing engineers. They talk about, well, what does it matter about the side information if it's all going to be played back in mono, some to mono in a live setup? And then I've talked to some clubs that talk about how they are actually, some are wired in stereo and just the bass is some to mono. Is this stuff you think about with the process? Because you don't want things disappearing at a festival stage or a club. How does the live translation affect how you mix?
Good question. I mean, it sounds a little bit stupid, but if it sounds good here in the studio, I know it will translate well on over the festival speakers. I mean, you don't want your whole mix to collapse when you press mono. If you still have a solid foundation, then you know it will translate well on a festival. So let's say you're kicking your bass already mono. Some of the beats are also really centered. Let's say you have some big room leads, for instance. What I usually do is I place one in the middle of my mix, and the rest I put more stereo, more wider. So if you would be playing this on a mono system, you would still hear the lead synth correctly. Sometimes you have synthesizers which have like 3 oscillators, which you can pan as well. So you can say I take oscillator 1, put it in the middle, put more focus on that one, and then oscillator 2 on the left, oscillator 3 on the right, to create more of a stereo image. And that way, it will translate well on stereo and on mono systems as well.
So you won't run into that problem of you detune a highly voiced synth that has a ton of voices, and it won't disappear because you've created sort of an alternate reality, a parallel version of that synth lead.
Yeah, of course I run into problems sometimes, but then, like I said, it's just trying to do it with mid-side or doubling the channels and setting them to mono and panning one a little bit to the left, one a little bit to the right, or things like if you have a mono signal, then send it out to a delay on your send bus, and then try to level those to be equally loud, and then again pan one to the left, one to the right. That way you can create wider sounds as well, which stay good in mono.
Right. And do you do anything where you're like maybe changing the way the transient hits on the left side versus the right side? I remember Flostradamus was talking about that, where he would actually just slightly offset things and they'll still sound great in mono, but he'll do like a different transient designer on each channel, or just do something to add this contrast. Do you do anything like that?
No. Sometimes I would like delay one of the channels like 4 to 10 milliseconds or something, but just to create like a chorus type of feel.
And do you think like with producers that are doing, I think a lot of guys rely on like the Haas effect, and then maybe they pay for it later on where it sounds great, and then boy, as soon as you hit the mono knob, it just sounds tinny and thin and small. Do you try to just use those techniques sparingly?
I have used those in the past, but I'm always evolving and changing, and I'm not really using that anymore. There was this cool plugin called Sound Delay. I think it's from Voxengo or something, which has like a really cool Haas effect thing going on with the delays. It works well, but doesn't translate good in mono. So yeah, I'm hardly ever using that again.
I think Kashmir was saying he's tried to wean himself off of the Haas effect.
Yeah.
It seems like it matters, like we were talking about, just building a good foundation, like picking the right sounds to begin with.
Absolutely, yeah. If you check like tracks from, like I was referencing to like Camel Fat or Calvin Harris for that matter. If you listen to those mixes, you can put your DAW on mono, and it would sound almost the same. It's like no phasing, nothing. It's like super tight. And then when you take it back to stereo, you hear that the reverb is coming up, the delays are coming up, vocals sound a little bit wider, and sometimes he uses like brass kind of things that create more wideness in the track. But for the rest, it's almost 100% mono. It's crazy.
Yeah, I feel like that with pop mixes, especially where you almost hear no difference and it sounds just as good in mono. And I guess everyone's chasing that as the holy grail, as their audio goal, part of it at least.
I agree.
So these days you're doing a lot of different projects. I mean, you're juggling the mixing work, the producing. You have your own projects with using your own name now.
True.
So you're involved with. I mean, you've always been deep into the creative process. Like, what's a typical day like for you?
A typical day for me is just go into the studio and make music. And depending on the client, it's a certain type of genre. So lately I've been doing tech house, deep house, like future house, like big room versus hardstyle kind of things, psytrance stuff, trance music, all that kind of stuff.
So what led to you wanting to use your own name more? I feel like you're much more out in the open now and more transparent about the process, and it's less about NDAs and keeping things secretive, although I'm sure there are agreements in place. Talk to me about that process of you're evolving from someone that was very much the secret producer, and when you Google ghost producer, your name comes up first. I feel like the scene's changed now, but how did that work for you, and how did that bring you to where you are now?
Well, first of all, you need to realize that when I started making music, I did everything under my own name. But that was like in the period from 2001 until 2008, 2009. I put out a lot of stuff under my own name, but also a lot of aliases. I think I had like 15 or 20 different aliases in the past. But like back in 2009, people started approaching me for, hey, can you make a track for me? Blah, blah, blah. So that's how the whole co-producing, ghost producing thing started for me. But I make a lot of music. Sometimes I'm in the studio and I feel like making something different, something weird. And then I just put it out under my own name. It's just for fun. So yeah, I still have like a lot of demos on my computer, which I still want to release at a certain point in time.
And in terms of secrecy, with these projects where you have to sign an NDA and you can't disclose who you're working with or who you're producing with, is that permanent? You can never talk about those projects?
I have never signed an NDA.
Wow, so it's a handshake agreement.
Yeah.
And do you prefer doing these projects where your name is first and you're getting more of the credit? And I mean, that's always been the sticking point, I feel like, with some of the ghost production.
Getting like credits is more of a DJ thing or something. I don't know. I don't really care about it, I guess.
Yeah. So, but you just love the process. You love getting in there. I mean, the goal is...
The thing is, I love making music. I don't like the music industry itself, but I love making music. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it's just so much more fun to focus on the craft and the art. And I can't do negotiations. My blood just boils dealing with all the middlemen. Yeah. And I mean, it just helps to have a good team, but I can't stand the process of negotiating and then feeling like, well, did I get screwed on this deal? Did I get a bad writer's share of this? And it's always a tough debate, right? Like you've got to, in the end, you have to agree on splits and everybody wants more. I think it's refreshing to me, though, with a lot of new, younger collaborators I'm working with. They're not as ego-focused, they're just hungry. They're excited to make music. They're excited to build a volume of work. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's also the perfect breeding ground for people to take advantage of.
Right.
Yeah, something to be cautious for. It's something I try to teach people as well. It's like, make sure that you know what you're doing,
Yeah, it is hard because people want that opportunity, and that's been the record label model forever, right? Like
Yeah.
People come in enthusiastic and naive and will take a subpar deal just to get into the industry.
Yeah.
Which is tough. It's tough because you have to start somewhere, and then I think everybody has had one bad deal at least, or been dropped from a label, and maybe wasn't expecting it to go that course. I mean, all the major label artists, I think almost every successful major label artist has been dropped once and gotten screwed once, but there's no excuse for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
so for me as a producer, I always have a different point of view than an artist. For an artist, it's important to be on certain labels, so you can get your image out there. For me as a producer, that's less important. So for me, it's all just fun.
Do you think it's changed now with Spinnin' getting bought by Warner Brothers and Armada being one of the last solely owned dance labels? Has that changed in terms of the best partners to work with? I mean, as much as you can talk about.
I think it's more of the streaming landscape has changed a lot. The labels, I mean, they're like, for me, they are more marketing agencies. So they have all the tools in place to promote your music very well, but you have to pay for it. I sometimes make the comparison that if you put the song out yourself and you get 100,000 streams, you probably earn the same as you would getting 1 million streams with a bigger label.
Yeah.
But still people want to release with a bigger label because it's good for the name, it's good for whatever.
And I think a lot of guys don't understand when starting out. I mean, even at any level, the major label wants you to have done the majority of the work first. It's pretty rare that they're going to come in. And even the projects that have been big successes that they claim are their babies, that they groomed from the beginning, are usually were already hits before they sign them.
Yeah.
So it's a tough process. But, I mean, as the landscape has changed, does it change the way you're producing? I mean, now, before, I feel like with the EDM boom, it was all about getting the biggest sound live, and you've created some of the biggest anthems out there. And then it seems like people went a little in the Chainsmokers direction. Things are going a little more underground house now, a little more bass focused. Does it change your philosophy and how to produce, or you just go in the studio and feel the vibe?
It has never changed my whole philosophy. I mean, I always say like a good melody is timeless, and you can produce that into any genre you like. I always say it's like every 7 years we are back at the beginning where we started. So now everybody is diving into like more of the underground stuff, and then in the end people will get bored from that, and then they want to be like harder music again, etc. So then big room will be back, or some form of big room. I mean, that's just like that's the cycle of life. So
it's always cyclical, yeah.
Yeah.
And what do you think about as these platforms change? And the most popular speaker in the country, at least in the U.S. right now, I think is the Amazon Echo, where first it was this headphone revolution with the success of Beats, and then now it's turning into more speakers that are smart home speakers. Are you seeing new ways people are consuming the music? Does that ever change the philosophy of how you produce, in terms of people aren't just listening on headphones, but now they're playing? Now there's like an Amazon Echo that does Atmos that I just got in the mail.
I haven't. I don't reference with an Amazon speaker. I still do it like the old-fashioned way. But I think I don't change my philosophy on this. But I do see it with like one of my proteges, Mazzare, Italian guy. He produces with earbuds.
Wow.
I'm just flabbergasted that he uses that. But he gets decent mixes with them. So I'm pretty sure that his mixes translate really well on laptops, on telephones, and probably an Amazon Echo speaker as well.
I think Audien does that too. He either uses the Bose or earbuds. I think just earbuds and everything in the mix. Yeah. And he's very efficient. I mean, he takes a lot of older sounds and updates them, but to do the whole process without any speakers just blows my mind.
Yeah, it's crazy. But in the end, it's what you're used to. But still, you need to hear like good low end. So yeah, that's going to be tricky. But a lot of these guys, they make a decent mix and then they send it off for for mastering, just to be to get it like 100% perfect.
Yeah, I think it's very hard to juggle everything. I mean, are you doing the final mastering all yourself as well, or sticking to? Do you have one other person that's the one final check?
Usually, I do everything myself. When I lived in Aruba, I did a few mixes with Kevin from Wired as well. But most of the time, no, I do it myself. Yeah.
To keep this consistency for your working? Do you ever use checklists or anything, or you just have your references? Maybe you're using templates in some way. How do you keep it so consistent so that you?
No, so I cannot, or I refuse to use templates. I think you would fall into old habits if you do that.
Right.
Plus, your music might sound a little bit too much the same, which would not be good in my case, because I produce for a lot of different people. So I try to have a little bit of a different sound every time for different people. So I try to approach it from the start. So, and sometimes that's really tricky, because if I have been working on a like hardstyle track for a whole week and I finish that, and then my next production would be a tech house song, then it usually takes a minute to adjust my brain and get into that type of sound.
Yeah, I was going to say, how do you keep it authentic to each brand you're working with? Each artist has its own brand. Maybe it has its own feeling. And there's even variety within their own sound. But how do you keep that mentally compartmentalized?
I'm always trying to get like a clear view of what the artist wants. I'm trying to get that expressed in words first. And then I'll try to create like a certain sound story around that and take that as the lead to make and to build the track. And also in every track that I produce, I always want to use like one slightly different technique which I haven't done before. That could be some weird automation, or just like a weird routing thing, or just an effect that I've never used, or try it on a send bus, or create, I don't know, different kind of effects, styles.
I always feel like that's a good way to try a new technique versus tinkering with a random session. Just use it in an active session, and then it's a better use of your time. And you'll probably get a better result from that because you've been in that session for so long.
Yeah.
When you're doing these projects and a request comes in, somebody wants to hire you to work on a track, are they giving you any sort of creative brief? Like you were saying, there's sort of in words, you're trying to figure out what they're going for. Are they saying what they're looking for, or are they giving you references of other songs that are made?
Well, usually I ask them what they're looking for, because I don't want to work on something and then later on they say, no, this is not what I meant. So I need to figure out what they want. I became pretty good at that during all these years. So then I can also send reference tracks to them and say, hey, is this something you're looking for then? Is it this type of genre? Or maybe we mix this genre with that genre. Let's try something different in that area, etc. So we talk about that. And then if we find a common agreement in that, then I start building the track.
Great. And so with new songs you're hearing, I mean, as you're mentoring talent, you're bringing in new collaborators like Mazar. What are the most common mistakes you're seeing people make? Like
what I think is very important is the final 10% in the track, and that is automating your effects. Like when you have a build up and that moment that the drop comes, you don't still want to hear the reverb of the build up, etc. So making everything really tight and clean, that's something like a lot of people tend to forget, which I think is one of the most important things to do, because that really takes your song to the next level.
So it's like trimming the tails?
Trimming the tails, exactly. Yeah, trimming the tails, cutting away low ends, like the basic stuff. So sometimes you don't need low end in the sound, so cut that away. A lot of people forget that. So in the end, they smack on a limiter, and then all that low end sub information is coming to the foreground.
How high do you go with okay, it's so easy to over high pass things and take the foot and the foundation out of the sound? Do you have I mean, it depends on the sound, obviously, but how much fat are you cutting out of that sound?
On which sound?
I guess any sound. Like, do you have any benchmark where you go, well, I got to high pass everything above, at 80 hertz on most sounds?
So if I have a sound which I know that doesn't need any low end, like a hi-hat, for instance, then I usually look at the spectrograph on FabFilter and then just cut it until the hi-hat begins. But I usually cut it while playing everything else. So then I see if it loses a lot of body or not. And that's also the best way to cut away low end. So while playing everything, low cut it, and then see where you can hear the biggest difference, and then just turning it back a little bit more.
And so what other issues do you see coming up? Are you seeing guys overusing OTT and things like that? I mean, a lot of that is the sonic sound people want, but are you seeing people just over-processing? What other problems?
Well, usually the processing of the problems start when mastering, then everything becomes noticeable. When you get the track to a certain loudness, then you see that the high end is one big mess, that all the frequencies above 15K are really like hissing, especially when they're all compounded on each other. If they use like 3 different loops and a cymbal, and then in the end it will sound like very annoying.
Right.
So you kill the movement, you kill your dynamic range in the high end. So yeah, that's stuff which I see a lot. And what I also see a lot is that people are using too much elements. So I always say less is more. Just like, for example, Mazare, when he sends over like a project, then usually you can just throw away like 60% because it's just adding nothing to the track. That's all created in the excitement of the creativity, and then in the end it's not adding anything. So I think a good producer should know, always mute a certain element in your track and see if you miss it or not. If you don't miss it, just throw it away. That's just excessive baggage.
I feel like it's so hard where sometimes you'll mute these elements if it's a very layered lead sound, and it takes away something, but there's too much clutter. So maybe you have to start with a new sound. But sometimes there's that middle ground where there's the overlayered sound, and then you mute it and you miss it. But you've got to find a way to capture that energy and emotion in a mix. And maybe it's just a different synth sound overall. But it's too many. It feels like it's always too many leads playing the same note, and there's not enough contrast between the parts.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a good tip as well. If you layer leads, then use some of the melodies, use them in like a half time, the other ones in double time. So you create a little bit of a different rhythm, and they would work better with each other then.
And we talked earlier about detuned sounds, things like that. Do you try to layer it so some elements you have certain layers are the more detuned versions, and some are the more like perfectly centered pitched versions?
Mm-hmm. True. Yeah.
And how do you juggle it with distortion? I mean, obviously, when you add distortion, it starts to create weird subharmonics. You've got to go back and filter that. How are you using distortion in your workflow?
I use distortion to decrease my dynamic range. So I sort of use it as a compressor. But I also use it to sculpt sounds. So sometimes I could take like a bass guitar and distort the hell out of it, so that becomes the lead sound. I used to do that a lot with my favorite Quadraflux plugin from the old Cubase. So yeah, I usually use distortion to decrease dynamic range and to create certain sounds. And saturation is more of a glue thing for me.
Do you have any other desert island plugins for distortion other than Quadrafuzz? Because that's only in, is it Cubase?
Well, I use a lot. I'm big fan of Camel Fat and Camel Crusher. I use Quadrafuzz because now somebody showed me a way to to use it in Studio One. But also, I really like the Fab Filter Saturn. I usually take like the 6 bands and then I just use it as an EQ, just to push some stuff more into the mix, certain frequency bands into your mix.
And are you doing less processing on the lows? Are you trying to do more upper, mids, and highs with distortion, or do you break it up like that in the spectrum?
I would not do. Also, again, depending on the genre, of course. But let's say if we're doing like a house track or something, I would not use a lot of distortion in the low end, maybe in the low mids, just to create more. How do you say that? That is more translatable on like smaller speakers. Mm-hmm. So either distortion or saturation.
And so, what other plugins are essential to your process?
For me, what I always have is like 2 reverbs. One kind of a room reverb is to place a sound in your mix environment, and then a hall reverb to create like big halls. At least one like ping pong delay. Glue compressor I love a lot. Yeah, like I said, Saturn, Fab Filter Pro, equalizers.
Have you messed around with all these new ones like Soothe and Gullfoss?
Yeah,
these more time based.
Yeah, I love Soothe. It's like super easy to use. You know, it's a real time saver for me. It's just to find all those resonances, which I normally cut out or use like dynamic EQ on those resonances. And now with Soothe, it does it for me. So yeah, that's really easy.
Are you using it on vocals, like de-essing vocals or other parts?
I use it on vocals, but sometimes on loops as well.
Wow.
Anything that could sound like really harsh.
If things are sounding like too boxy or sibilant. Yeah.
Yes, I'm always for the hiss kind of sound. The type of sounds. It's perfect for that.
So with all this work you've done the productions. Have you done sample packs? Any sample packs like with Splice you're going to work on?
I have talked to the guys about that, but no, I still haven't done that. So I'm quite busy. So I haven't found the time for that.
I think once you start the process, you really have to commit to it. Like it's at least a week, 2 week minimum to make a decent pack.
Oh, absolutely.
Week, right?
Probably a lot longer for me. And I recently carved out a lot of time to finish my second book. So that was high on my priority list.
What got you into writing all these tips down and creating the books?
Well, I got so many messages on Facebook every time. Hey, how do you do this? How do you do that? I was like, shit. You know what? Every week I'm going to pick one of those questions and post an answer on Facebook. And that turned into like a Vorwerk tip of the week. And like after 3 years, people were like, hey, is there any way you have all these tips bundled? Is there some place where I can read them again? I mean, you cannot scroll back to a Facebook timeline. So that gave me the idea to bundle all the tips into a book and publish them. So yeah, that's how it started.
Yeah, I feel like people don't realize how much work it takes to assemble the tips. I mean, I've done it with my quick tips and Kashmir's done it, and it takes so much work. You realize why there aren't that many resources out there like that.
Yeah.
So you collected them all initially, and you kind of expanded and revised the ideas. Do you have any personal favorites in there?
Well, they are all personal favorites. I mean, the most of them are based on personal experience, and of course, a lot of them I fact checked afterwards because I don't want to put like wrong information in the book. Although when producing music, you can never actually go wrong because you're always trying to experiment, trying to find new ways of processing. But yeah, business tips or pitfalls, that kind of things. It's sort of, it's not really fun to tell, but it's really educational to tell people, and a lot of people can relate to them as well. So, I mean, I think those things are really important as well.
Yeah, I like that it encompasses more than just how to create a fat kick drum, and to me, that's one of the issues with all these tutorials. There's so many great YouTube tutorials, but a lot of them aren't time stamped. You can't really see what information is going to be covered. A lot of them should have show notes on them. But I like that your tips get to the point, and that was one goal of mine too with quick tips was let's get to it. Let's make something digestible so you're not searching for something and then 30 minutes later you realize, oh, shit, that was a waste of time watching this video.
Yeah. So I also made videos of these tips, but just like one season, 25 videos. And also in those videos, it's straight to the point. This is what we're going to do, and I'll just show you how I do it. I don't like those tutorials where people are sitting there for an hour talking and then 5 minutes they tell you what you want to know. I like getting to the point fast and trying to teach people with a sense of humor as well. I think that's the best way. So that's how I do it.
So where is it going next? You've got the second book is out now. Are you doing videos for this as well?
I have so much content to make a lot more videos, but again, that's very time consuming. So I need to see where I fit all of this into my schedule. But now I am working on getting the book in Spanish translated as well, and focus a little bit more on Latin America as well.
Are you getting a lot of requests from the fans? They're asking for translations?
Yeah, they're asking for translations. So, yeah, I can't tell you a lot about it yet, but I'm trying to team up with somebody who is familiar in Latin America. And we're going to try and do some stuff together based on Vorwerk Tip of the Week and some other stuff.
And you've done some classes with Luca, like guest lectures, things like that. Are you doing more of those in the coming years? Are there any plans for that?
No, like if I get asked, then I'll probably do it, but it's not like on the top of my list. So
there's only so much time in the day to prep for those.
Yeah, only so much time in the day. I'm pretty busy doing, my productions, family life, and also working on Tip of the Week stuff. So yeah, that's already consuming a lot of my time. I do want to make like a lot of new videos, a lot of new video content. So that is on my list. But like doing like a lot of lectures or master classes, probably not at location, but I'm working on doing that in my studio, either online or actually in my studio in the Netherlands.
So are you doing private classes and mentorship now?
Yeah. So I'm doing, already for a couple of years now, I'm doing one-on-one lessons online, which are great to do, actually. It's really fun. You get people all over the world. So, and they're all struggling with stuff. And you get to see their projects and you get to tell them, how to improve and how to get better in mixing and producing and trying to get your music out there on the labels.
How are you sharing your screens? What kind of software are you using?
Nowadays, I'm using Yondo.
So that lets you see into their sessions, and you can kind of see video of them as well. It's all these different sources integrated.
Yeah, that's really cool stuff. It also gives you the possibility to do like webinars in your studio as well. So people can see my screen and they can hear everything coming out of my DAW.
Nice. And are you doing it all? Obviously, you're doing it in headphones. So you're not getting feedback from it, but it's a very, very much an intimate session, and you can get that feedback to them quickly. So you're not going back and forth on emails. It's a very immediate feedback.
Yeah, it's really immediate. Yeah. For the one-on-one lessons, it's like it's direct. So yeah.
I think it's with guest lectures. It's so hard because I get so many requests to go and speak at schools, but usually they don't offer a payment, and it takes a lot of time to prep for these things. But they'll be like for-profit schools, and they want free lectures to come in. I think it's important to give back to the community, but that's one reason I did my tips too. It scales better. Like you get so many questions about things and your flow with all the interviews you do that I prefer to have it all in one place and not repeat myself. It's like, oh, you can find it. It's all online. There's 800 tips here. Boom.
Yeah, true. And what I think was really weird in the beginning is that if you give a guest lecture you have a lot of people in front of you, and you just tell your story, and they watch you, but you have no idea if they like your information or not. They're just like looking at you.
Right.
And then I did my thing, and then afterwards we did like Q&A, and then everybody was, hey, how do you do this? How do you do that? And I found a Q&A is much more fun to do because you have so much more interaction.
Yeah, it needs to be a conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
That is true. I think, I did a master class with JBL and Harmon, and you kind of do it and you get your applause at the end, but you don't know. It's really hard to read the room in terms of like, I don't think people are going to do standing ovations at a guest lecture. It's just not. It's not the type of people that are there. They're might be more introverted studio people.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So what else is next? I mean, we're in this really weird time with EDM, kind of going back into its own box a little bit. I think we had this crazy hockey stick exponential growth that happened. Vegas is really correcting now, especially with Chaos closing. I think it's hard to be aware of these macro trends, but where do you think things are headed right now?
I think nowadays the underground is coming back again. I see a big like tech house culture growing in the United States. I might even see that like converting with hip hop as well. Doing like crossover stuff. But still nowadays I think the continents are still a little bit separated on what works or what not. I see in Asia they still play like the big room stuff that works really well. In the United States, like I said, it's like more, I think, tech house, bass house, and hip hop. And Europe is still very commercial, pretty happy music, and of course hardstyle stuff.
Yeah, I'm curious to see where it goes because I think the way people are consuming music is changing pretty differently now, as obviously the subscription services are so cheap, but now we're seeing like Peloton, these exercise bikes. Now I'm seeing a royalty statement from an exercise bike.
Serious?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I mean, they're playing a ton of dance music on there, and they actually got sued for not accounting for that. And now they are, so now they're paying for it, but I see it in my BMI statement now. I see, they played Bodywork 20 times in this class. You don't see it by class, but you see when it was played.
Well, that's a good way to detect trends.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. You can start your marketing in the gym.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it's the more ways people can discover it, whether it's in a VR game like Beat Saber. I've done some projects with those guys. It's hard to see what is moving the needle sometimes. I mean, you can see counts, but I think that these platforms have so much advantage by seeing all the numbers. It's kind of like Netflix seeing all the counts, all the play counts, and what's being skipped. When does viewership peak or dip? So maybe in my mind, I'm thinking that artists need to have a little more control over their platforms, and I don't know if it means building their own platforms or not. We've done some projects where, have you heard of Community, that service where people text the artist and they reply back, and it's not a bot, it's really them.
I see that around me. Yeah.
I think it's such a powerful tool, and we built our own version of it called Ringy. But it's you text the artist, and it'll funnel through a number. It's not your personal number, obviously. It'd be crazy to give that out. But you enable it; it goes through. I can text back, or I can call. A fan can call me directly, and we can have a one-on-one conversation. It's really cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. I see like there are so many communities nowadays, which all have their own like genre, clothing, merchandise thing going on. I do think it's really important for an artist to create your own following, your own channels. I think it's better to have like your own YouTube channel and putting your music out through that than doing it via label. But that's my producer point of view. I always look at music as well to like how to make money with your music, which for a DJ might not be that important because when they have like a big show or a big tour, they make like 20 times more money than with their music. So
yeah, it's scary when a platform collapses. You have this period of arbitrage where the platform doesn't have a ton of noise or saturation in terms of competing sounds, and like when SoundCloud was really good or when Vine was good. I mean, SoundCloud hasn't collapsed, but it's definitely less effective. But I feel like you get this window with each platform. You have to snap it up while you can. Otherwise, you may lose all that user data. I mean, if you're not collecting phone numbers or email opt-ins, you're basically throwing out your user data.
Yeah, true.
Which is scary.
But I see it also with YouTube channels. I think it's in the United States, it's the same, where you see it in the Netherlands a lot with hip hop artists. When they put out a new song on their own YouTube channel, they get like 300,000 like views in one day or something, which is pretty big in the Netherlands. You know, and they grow their own community. They do everything via their own channels. It works better for me, I guess. I mean, they make more money. They have more control on how they want to profile themselves to their fans. So yeah, I think that is the future.
It's hard because I've seen artists that blew up on spinning and then change labels, and then when they don't have that machine behind them, they don't get the same YouTube views. And I don't know if that's just the media buys or the investment that's being made by the labels.
Yeah, but again, you pay for the machine,
right?
You know? So, as we all know, Facebook uses algorithms, YouTube uses algorithms. So, if you have a big channel which has 20 million subscribers, if you put out a video, that doesn't mean that all your 20 million subscribers will see that video. So you have to pay advertising money to present it to all those subscribers. And that's coming out of your own pocket. So, you know.
It's all recoupable. It's all a bad bank loan in the end with the record labels.
Yeah.
With like a way worse than a loan on a house.
Yeah.
But it's going to be interesting to see where it goes from now, because I think my guess is what will happen is artists, maybe they're not going to become multimillionaires, but your average Joe will be able to make a sustainable living. You know, maybe they're making $50K a year doing what they love, or $70K, like making a livable wage on the music and finding a way to do it without having to get stressed out with the tour and having to divide everything up with a huge team behind them. It's more self-empowered, more sustainable.
Yeah, there are so many platforms nowadays which make it easy for you to put out your own music. I do it myself as well. Sometimes I put out music via DistroKid. You know, you have places like Fiverr where you can have people make a logo for you, make a cheap video clip. I once had this girl dancing in a bikini on the beach on one of my songs. You know, you pay them $20. So you can create like funny or interesting content with a low budget and still make it interesting for your followers.
Yeah, especially with TikTok now. I mean, I think there's all these, maybe the future of it is you're breaking things down into more. Instead of hiring one big publicist that's $10,000 a month, you're hiring 1,000 different publicists. The little people like TikTok influencers, you know, Instagram creators, and maybe the secret sauce is just how you manage all of that and manage the complexity of it, because it's going to get even more complex, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's going to be complex, and in the end, you would need a manager to handle all that kind of stuff for you. But it's good to dive in yourself and see how everything works and what creates buzz and what doesn't.
Yeah, it has to be measurable. It seems like I'm always asking that question when we start a new project, like, is this going to move the needle? And do we even know what the needle is measuring? You know, that's always the challenge to me, because you can do a ton of press for a new release, and it's hard to know, like, people's tastes change. Like maybe blogs were so essential for blowing up tracks for a long time, and Hype Machine was what helped launch Chainsmokers, really. And they just built a volume of work with this platform at the right time. But then the trend moves on, and it's off to another way, another method. So I don't know. I haven't fully embraced TikTok yet, but I got to get on that.
Yeah, take a look at Triller as well.
Triller, yeah.
Yeah, it's a big one in the US. Yeah.
What do you think about like Cameo? Have you seen these services? People do like the shout outs, and everyone sets their own price. Like celebrities set $50 or $500.
I mean, yeah, that's the world we live in nowadays. So, yeah. I mean, I can imagine you want to use that. I mean, you need to reach like your target audience, you know, and if that helps, that helps. I mean,
I think, and that's the thing. Like, you've got to. find that niche. And the niche, I don't think, is so small anymore. Now it's like the niche is mass. And if you don't hit the niche, I feel like it's just almost impossible to hit that top tier radio level with music, and the amount it costs, right, to do a radio campaign, hundreds of thousands of dollars, at least for the US. I don't know what it's like in Europe.
It's more tens of thousands, maybe. Yeah, depending on if it's like a really big song or not. But,
yeah, it's just so many territories.
We don't have that many radio stations in the Netherlands, so you hire like somebody who visits the radio stations. So it's probably like 5 stations or something, and a couple in Belgium.
Well, as we wrap up, looking forward, is there any new technology you're really excited about in the world of music and entertainment in general?
Yeah, I'm curious to see where augmented reality will take us. And I'm looking forward to doing a masterclass where people would be actually in my studio, like in a virtual reality environment. I mean, those things are coming closer now and becoming cheaper to do. So,
can you imagine a DAW in that?
Yeah, so everybody can work in the same DAW. You know, you already have that kind of stuff, and Studio One is also having more collaborative, like splice kind of thing going on. So yeah, that's interesting to see how that will evolve.
Oh, yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. What now we're seeing Splice do the exchange with Top Lines. I don't know if it's public yet, but they're...
I don't think so.
Oops. Well, anyways, Top Lines on Splice are a thing regardless.
Yeah, well, Vengeance was already doing that, or Vandalism, I don't know.
Yeah, where it's sort of a new derivative work. I mean, is this the future of how people work? Because I'm seeing so many young producers now kind of emerging out of nowhere, and I'll say, where's this? They'll be pitching me a song to work on as a collab, and I go, where's this vocal from? And they go, oh, it's a royalty-free thing. And part of me loves that. Part of me, it scares me because we've run into some sample issues with having to clear real samples. But when it's royalty-free, where is this headed? Like, where are we going with this new collaborative workflow with this sort of almost faceless vocalist?
I mean, it's a good way to create income for songwriters, you know. So I still believe it's a really good thing. I think it's for songwriters, it's really hard struggle to make money. You write a lot of top lines, some get picked, then you have to wait for a long time, still not making any money, and then something comes out, and then finally you're gonna do your contracts, and then after a year and a half you receive some money, and now you are able to create a top line, record it, put it online, and then somebody can download it right away for some money. I mean, it's sort of the same thing as I do, but then more in a like smaller way. But
I almost want to meet the vocalist sometimes, and it's hard to even get their contact information because they may not even be properly credited, anonymized, maybe by their choice. You know, sometimes artists don't want to be featured on things anyways, or in terms of songwriters and singers. But I almost want to go and find these singers and be like, hey, can you just... let's take this amazing melody you have and get rid of these terrible lyrics and just kind of tweak these. You know, I get so many of these.
I mean, I think you should be able to do that if you can find them.
That'll be a whole new service to be able to track them down. Now, you got to pay more money now. But almost as a way to discover new vocalists. But it's hard when you have that very static top line. It's like you don't have them in your studio. You can't coach them anymore. It's set in stone. Just like doing a remix, I guess. But part of me wants to be able to reach out and say, let's tweak these lines and let's kick the tires a little bit and make this stronger.
Well, yeah, again, it's a way also for us to find new talent and to maybe grow them as well as an artist. What I also think is really cool, you have a lot of websites nowadays where you can just hire some guy to play your bassline guitar. So maybe you play the bassline on your synthesizer and you want to have like the actual bass guitar. So yeah, you just hire somebody and you pay him, I don't know, $50, and then he records it with his bass guitar, and then you can use it in your track, which I think is really awesome.
It's exciting because I think it can be harder if you're hiring somebody in Nashville, a session musician, and they want to be paid at scale, and it can be tricky working around. But I think it's way more fluid to collaborate this way. If you get the result you want, it's great.
Yeah. So the industry is getting a lot more competitive. So you need to be much more creative to make money with your music. I think that's a good thing, but yeah, you need to stay on top of things, and that can be hard for some people.
Yeah, and I think, finding ways to make sure these releases come out and it's not the same top line, like 3 different versions. We've already run into this with Armada, where I'll do a song with a spliced top line, and that they already have it in their catalog. It's already come out with like a big name producer and an unknown producer, and you have to figure out, okay, what do we do about this? Like, do we still go ahead? Is it less special to have a canned vocal? I don't know what we call it, but they're almost like, it's almost like covers, like unintentional covers.
Yeah. Well, I think, you're making, I mean, if it's in the same genre, I wouldn't do it. If it's completely different genre, then I would say, this is the time we live in, so why not? Of course, people gonna say on YouTube, hey, I know this vocal, but, it happens.
I guess it's hard. It depends how you present it, right? If you can't really push it as your big new vocal single to radio, it can be cannon fodder for the clubs, but I think it's harder. It'd be harder because you only get so many shots with the playlist gatekeepers and the radio pluggers. If they're going to be like, I know this vocal and it's not a cover of a different song, it's actually the same vocal, then you might have some problems.
Yeah.
Or it may not be worth the money. But I think it is super valuable, though, there's a lot of really talented bedroom producers that don't have access to vocalists. They don't have that deal flow coming through a publisher or other collaborators to have vocalists come into their studio. So that's always the question I get from people, like, where can I find good vocalists? And it's hard because you've got to build trust. And, some vocalists want to get paid in advance up front before they even start writing, which is crazy to me.
Yeah.
But they've been burned in the past, so you can kind of see the deal history there.
Yeah. I can totally relate to that. I mean, if it's a good singer-songwriter, then then it's obvious they only want to work with the right people. So if they want to be paid in advance, I can imagine. Yeah, I can relate. Yeah.
I had one singer who wanted like $5,000 for the vocals without me hearing it yet.
Okay, that might be overdoing. That's overdoing it, but yeah.
I said, maybe let me just check it, and she played it for me on earbuds. She wouldn't even send me the file. It turned into a great song, but it's but it was so funny. It was somebody that's done a lot in dance music and had some experiences with major labels and with voice competitions. So, I think people can get too cagey, and it can almost suck the oxygen out of the room in a creative environment. If you're talking about money, it's that really tough balance of, you don't want to start a session on a business note, but you do need to establish some ground rules if you don't have a manager or somebody setting the expectations, right?
Absolutely. I always set the expectations up front. I don't care. I don't like dealing with stuff afterwards and then feeling cheated or something.
It's hard, and then people come out of the woodwork. I've always found that you'll have 2 writers on a track, and maybe one did the melody and one did the lyrics, and sometimes pairs work like that. And then you find out there's 3 other writers you had no idea were involved with production, so it gets split up even further. Yeah, it's like that's how the pop records get to 9 writers.
Yeah, that's true.
But if you're not doing a pop record, it's kind of a pain in the ass.
Yeah, and if you figure this out afterwards, that's not good. So it's easier to be in a session and say, okay, hey guys, we're all together here. We'll split it up like this. Everybody agrees. Yes, okay, let's do this, and then start having fun. Everybody knows the drill. You have to talk about it at some point in time. So.
Yeah, I almost like both far ends of the spectrum, where it's either like a royalty-free sample, you can have fun with it, or you're in the same room together, and it's very clear who did what and how much work was put in, and it's not this email chain, but you go in LA, New York, Nashville style, do it in a day, write a song in a day, get the most of that work done, and then it's more pure, and there's no questions about where it came from. But it's also harder, and it can be nerve-wracking, right, to be in a studio and be like, start with nothing. I had Pooh Bear came to my studio once, who does a lot of Bieber's work, and it's nerve-wracking. Like, this guy makes some incredible records with Skrillex, with Bieber. He's written for everybody. And he comes in with a title list. So he starts with these little seeds, just titles. And he has such good flow and stream of consciousness that he can go through and hear the instrumental and be able to write that melody. Does the mumble first, sings it out. But, those are the pros, right? They come in and prepared. They used to have something to start with.
Yeah.
So at least you got to have a title.
But that's pro level. I mean, it's not every day you see that, right?
Yeah.
So the normal grind would be you make an instrumental track, you send it out, and then you wait to get pitched the vocal top line for that instrumental, which can take forever. So I usually prefer working the other way around. So receiving a top line and then creating a track for it.
And you're getting the a cappella solo or with the block piano chords?
I don't care. No, doesn't matter.
It's definitely such a good fluid way. I mean, it's the fastest process.
It's the fastest and most fulfilling way. I mean, it's really nice to have the vocal first and then create the music and see how everything fits together, because you get used to the vocal very quickly. And then if you send out your instrumental, you get your vocal, and you already waited like 1 or 2 months, and then it's like, nah, it's not so good. Let's try a few other ones. And then it's 6 months down the line. And then your track might be less relevant. You get more insecure as producer for putting out the record. So yeah,
you hear it too many times, and then you can't see the forest for the trees.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Do you have any tricks you do to kind of keep it fresh in your mind so that it's? I mean, you can't unlisten to a song, but you just take breaks.
I take breaks sometimes because as a producer, you're always listening very differently than a consumer. So I sometimes try to listen to a track as a consumer. So I need to be doing something else at that moment. So I have like a ping pong table over here. So I might play some table tennis and then put the song on a loop and then listen to it like from consumer perspective. And then, see if it makes sense or not. And then run back in the studio and change things or not.
Yeah, it seems like you got to hear it in another room, regardless of even listening to different speakers in my studio.
Another room and another mindset. And,
right.
And I think that's, for me at least, that's really hard. Because even when I'm in a club, I always listen to music like as a producer. So I need either to get really drunk to enjoy the music that's being played, or otherwise, I'm always listening like with technically.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we better wrap things up. I got to roll out, but this has been great, man. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and I was glad we got to kind of dig into the technical details, and maybe we'll do it again for book 3, whatever.
Whenever.
But thanks, man. I really appreciate it. All right, so there you have it. Incredible interview with Maarten Vorwerk. We really got into the details there. That was really nice to kind of get into his mind and his approach and process to making music. And to engineering tracks, making them sound loud, making them translate to the club and the festivals. These are really critical details to get into, and it's really important to make your music sound as best as it can be on the main stage. So hopefully you got some value from that. And had a great conversation. Just a cool guy, very knowledgeable, one of the most knowledgeable people in dance music. So it was an honor to have him. And we'll be back next week for another episode. So see you then. This is Airwave with Morgan Page. Airwave is brought to you by RME Audio. Innovative, user-friendly, and high-quality digital audio solutions, RME offers a comprehensive range of audio interfaces, converters, and mic preamps, all based around its unique and innovative core technologies. Multi-platform connectivity across Windows and Mac OS and iOS class compliance has earned RME a global reputation for providing support to all users on all platforms. Visit rme-usa.com to learn more.